Hey, it's weekly word time again. Thanks for joining us. I'm standing here at the oldest remaining building that can be found on Starr Mountain. And this one goes way back. Probably built by Burkett Ivins, the old legendary lawman from back around the 20s and 30s over on the McMinn County side. He lived by the sword and died by the sword, as a lot of the old lawmen did back then. Interesting stories about Burkett Ivins, but this used to be his place. And they have a little thing around Halloween every year in Etowah called Murders on Main Street. And you can go from corner to corner and they can show you the where Burkett Ivins had the showdowns and had killed people, and eventually they killed him. They put dynamite in his car and blew him up. I think he was probably the one who built this. Can't even say that for sure. We don't know exactly what it used to be. The older generation that's recently passed away in the last decade, a couple of those men, they had ideas. They didn't know what this building ever was. Maybe a corn crib or something. They had their own theories. It's kind of been lost over the years. I have my own that I'm going to share with you here in just a minute, but there is one gentleman still alive who's up in his 90s. He rebuilt this thing in the 1960s, and you can see what he did from here up. These are like telephone poles, and it's metal on the roof up there now. Probably originally it had just wood shakes for a roof, and these squared hand-hewn logs would have been all the way up. Whenever you see these hand-hewn logs, I'll show you something really neat about them. See each one of these little marks all over them? That's how they made square logs back before sawmills. That's actually the marks you're looking at from the broadaxe, as they would stand and just split rails and make them into squares until eventually they got them square enough and straight enough that they'd come to the corners and lock them in here. These sort of a dovetail-like design in some of these. Of course, way back there in the 1800s, when people still lived in these log cabins, then they would take this this mud called chinking, and they would fill in all the holes between the logs for the winter time, keep the heat in. But in the summertime, they would knock it out, you know, let the air in. It'd just be like their air conditioned, then there'd be cracks. I bet the mosquitoes probably came in too, don't you? Here's my theory what this old building used to be, though. Now, it's not an exact thing, but I don't think there was probably that window there before it was rebuilt. See, that's in the newer edition that was made 50, 60 years ago. If we come on around here, it has kind of an interesting door on it. And the door swings up like this. And you can crawl inside. I've been inside, but I would only go in the wintertime. There's probably rattlers in there in the summertime. But my theory is this. When Burkett Ivins had this place, there's lots of evidence around here. There's rocks everywhere for miles where they would clean them out of the fields and move them out of the roads and along the roadside. And the story goes that Burkett would bring the prisoners up here. That's where all that rock work come that we still see around here. And I think this may have been actually a jail up here on Starr Mountain. And here's what supports my theory. If it were a corn crib or anything like that, look at these old hasps. 1, 2, 3. Or you could put padlocks on there and to keep anybody from coming out this way. And it just makes sense if Burkett brought prisoners up here, he had to have somewhere to keep them at night so they wouldn't run off. So I could just see him kind of like, get in here, boys, get a good night's rest. We've got a lot of work to do again tomorrow, more rocks to move. How'd you like to have to stay in a jail like that? That's pretty bad, ain't it? But do you know there's a jail that's worse than any kind of thing like this? And some people just seem to enjoy being in it because you can be in bondage to your own sins. And that's why Christ come to set us free. The door is open, and Jesus says, come on out and enjoy freedom. Quit being under the bondage of your own sins. I hope you've come to Christ and you know that in Christ there is liberty. We'll see you next time. We'll try to find some weekly word outdoor adventure for next week. Let's lock up again here.